My family took a trip to Switzerland without me. They didn't invite me, but they did take my money. My mom posted a picture online, just them, the close ones. When I saw it, I thought it was an old photo from a trip I'd missed out on years ago. But then, something about it caught my eye. The lighting, the clothes, they looked recent. I zoomed in and noticed James was wearing the hoodie I gave him last Christmas. The snow looked fresh. My dad wore that loud red parka he loves. It hit me then. This wasn't a throwback. I scrolled through the comments. A family friend asked if the Alps were as stunning as they seemed. Another cousin commented, "Wow, Switzerland, living the dream." My aunt even wrote, "Surprised Selena isn't there with you guys?" No one replied. It stung, realizing they were there without me, living a dream while I was left out. The last time I saw them was 3 weeks ago. I'd suggested we take a small family trip to Oregon, a weekend in a cabin, maybe enjoy the hot springs, do a bit of hiking. My parents seemed uncomfortable with the idea. Mom said money was tight. James mentioned exams. I ended up paying for lunch that day. Lately, I always do. A few days later, Dad called and asked if I could keep the emergency credit card active, just in case. I agreed, trusting them. I never thought they'd do something like this. But now here I was, looking at a photo of them in Zermatt with two people I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized they were my parents' friends, Steve and Donna, the kind who sneak liquor into weddings and argue over karaoke at family events. They're not family. Neither is James's girlfriend, who appeared in the background of another photo sticking her tongue out on a ski lift. I opened my banking app, unsure what I'd find. 6 airline tickets, San Francisco to Zurich, over $8,700 in charges, all within 2 days. 4-star hotels in Interlaken, train rides, ski rentals, fondue reservations, even a hot air balloon tour. All on my emergency card. The card had a $9,000 limit. They maxed it. I just sat there, not even angry yet, just stunned, until James accidentally texted me. He meant to send it to someone else. "LOL," it said. I stared at it for maybe a full minute before replying, "He just did." And then I got to work. I spent the next few hours on the phone. I reversed every transaction I could, flagged their IDs on the booking platform. They'd used my travel wallet account, so I had all the passport numbers, photos, and ticket receipts right there. I even sent the ski resort a fraud notice with a copy of my ID. Cancellations began to fly. I called the bank and reported the card as stolen by someone I knew. I wasn't lying. By the time I was done, I had their hotel reservations yanked, ski passes canceled, rental van gone, and even their dinner at that mountaintop revolving restaurant was off the table. At 6:03 a.m., my phone started vibrating 22 times. I didn't answer. Not the first 3 calls from Mom, not the 5 from James, not the one from Steve's burner number, not the ones from Dad. But when Dad called again at 7:41 a.m., I picked up. Dad said they needed $4,200 to fly back to San Francisco. Could I help them? Just for now? I said no. Silence. I told him I hoped they enjoyed the rest of their time there, but they'd have a lot to explain when they got back. Trouble was already waiting. Then I hung up. Let them feel it. They'd be back in 2 days. James has his own money. He can pay for once. I wasn't done, not even close. They touched down in San Francisco early Thursday morning. I didn't need to track their flight. I got the update from Mrs. Langley, who lives across the street from my parents. She's like a human ring camera, always peeking out her window. Her message came at 6:12 a.m. "They're back. Suitcases look trashed. Your dad's limping. No one smiled. Thought you should know." I was already dressed. I showed up at 6:41. Donna was yelling into her phone, barefoot, on the driveway. Steve looked like someone punched him mid-hangover. James was dragging a busted Samsonite up the steps while his girlfriend sat on it, too tired or too entitled to lift a finger. My parents stood by the door like they were waiting to be sentenced. I didn't bother saying hi. I parked across the street, walked up, and went straight to the point. They owed me $4,200 for non-refundable charges. They had 3 days. Mom blinked like she didn't understand English. Dad tried to speak, but I stopped him by pulling out my phone. I remember the day it all became clear, like a fog lifting to reveal a landscape I wished I hadn't seen. I was sitting there, staring at my laptop screen, heart pounding in my chest. I had opened a folder labeled Fraud Docs, and what I saw made my stomach churn. There were screenshots of every transaction, dates, times, their names, their faces on hotel check-in records, passport scans. They even had their skiing itinerary. It was all right there, pulled from my travel wallet. They really did use everything: my saved documents, stored passwords, even my emergency credit line. It felt like they had gone through my entire digital life and booked themselves a luxury European vacation, then had the audacity to post about it online like they'd won some kind of sweepstakes. When James stepped forward, he tried to brush it off, saying I was blowing it way out of proportion. But I couldn't just let it slide. He had excluded me, lied to my face, taken my money, and then had the nerve to call me dumb in a text that he accidentally sent to me instead of whoever it was actually meant for. He tried to justify it, saying it was a trip for people who knew how to relax and that I wouldn't have fit in. I'd already gotten that message loud and clear from their Instagram caption. Just us, the close ones. I couldn't even bring myself to care about what his girlfriend muttered under her breath. My focus shifted to my parents, who had borrowed my trust and turned it into theft. I told them I'd frozen everything, reversed what I could, but was still out $40. I demanded they pay me back or I'd involve legal action. That finally got their attention. My mom started to say something that might have been an apology, but I cut her off. They had used Steve and Donna's names on the bookings. That was impersonation, and they had no right to do any of it. I gave them 3 days to sort it out. No calls, no texts, just pay. And then I left. By the end of the day, they had scraped up the money. Uncle Mark came through, though I heard later he had given James a lecture that lasted an hour. Apparently, it ended with, "You're lucky I don't send you to rehab just for being this stupid." They wired the money to me that night. No subject line, no message. Fine by me. I marked the file as repaid, archived the folder, and went to bed, sleeping like a brick. The next morning, I found James standing outside my building. No text, no warning, just standing there like he expected some sitcom-style resolution. He told me I had ruined the trip for everyone. I leaned against the railing, trying to keep my composure. I reminded him that they hadn't invited me. I could have handled it differently, quietly, but they had excluded me, lied about why, used me, mocked me, and hoped I wouldn't notice. And now he wanted what? Sympathy? He stared at me, maybe seeing me for the first time, accusing me of acting like I was better than everyone. I didn't answer because honestly, I am better than people who would pull a stunt like they did. He left without an apology, without any shame, just a bitter look that he'd probably practiced in the mirror. But he had a bigger problem on his hands. I had been paying his tuition for the last year and a half. Next semester, he would be on his own. I didn't make a speech, didn't call a family meeting. I just logged into the university portal, opened the finance section, removed my card from James's tuition plan, disabled autopay, and closed the tab. He probably thought I'd forgotten. The deadline passed quietly. A week later, the system flagged his unpaid balance, $642. A hold hit his account. No registration, no access to the student portal, just a polite email informing him that his enrollment had been suspended due to non-payment. That was when the silence broke. James texted first, casually. "Hey, something glitched with the payment. I think tuition didn't go through. Can you check it?" I'd left it on red. Next came the call. Ignored. Then the voicemail, half concern, half command. "Can you just take care of this today, please? I've got labs starting soon." Not a single word about what he'd done, just assuming the engine would keep running. Then my mom tried. 3 voicemails. The last one almost 5 minutes long. It started calm, too calm, and turned into some meandering monologue about forgiveness, how families make mistakes, and how I needed to stop letting money define me. That line stuck with me. Money defines you. Like I hadn't spent years covering their rent when Dad was out of work. Like I didn't drop 5 figures on James's tuition last year while working weekends to keep up. They didn't mind money when I was their walking bank account. A day later, my dad messaged me, short, without emotion. I understand. Do what you have to do. That one landed differently, but not enough to change anything. Then James tried again. You're seriously not paying? I replied, correct. The next call came in hot. You're a joke, Selena. You're ruining my future over a vacation. That's how small you are. No, I'm holding you accountable. That's how tired I am. You don't get it. I need this semester. I'm behind already. I didn't ask you to book ski trips with my card or post about it while pretending I didn't exist. Jesus, you're bitter. No, you're a thief. Silence followed, and for a second I thought he had hung up. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. It's hard to put into words the whirlwind of emotions I've been through these past few weeks. It's like everything I thought I knew about family and trust has been flipped upside down. I remember that phone call like it was yesterday. I was sitting there, minding my own business, when my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated for a second before picking up. On the other end was a woman named Jenna from student accounts at Selagi University. She was trying to reach me about an unpaid tuition balance for James Palmer. My heart sank. I never agreed to be anyone's financial guarantor. She calmly said they had a signed form on file with my name and signature. It felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. I asked her to send me the document. When I opened the email and saw the PDF, I couldn't believe my eyes. There it was, my name, my address, my phone number, and a signature that was supposed to be mine. It was close, but not quite. It was a forgery. The box next to assume financial responsibility in the event of non-payment was checked, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. James hadn't just asked for help. He had crossed a line I never thought anyone in my family would. This wasn't just taking advantage. This was deception on a whole new level. I was in shock. My mind raced as I tried to process what this meant. I immediately called Jenna back to file a fraud claim. I sent her everything, my ID, real signature samples, messages with James. She assured me it would be investigated, but until then, I was considered responsible. If it wasn't resolved, the debt would hit my credit. The thought of that made me feel cold inside. This was beyond anything I had imagined. It wasn't just a breach of trust, it was a declaration of war. I didn't reach out to James right away. I needed to talk to someone who could understand the gravity of the situation. That weekend, I drove to my grandfather's house. He's always been different from the rest of the family. No fake smiles, no guilt trips, just quiet judgment and a solid memory. I sat across from him at his small kitchen table and showed him the forged document. He read it slowly, then asked if I had reported it. I nodded. He stood up, went into the back room, and returned with a small lockbox. Inside was a folded deed for the family lake cabin, a place I hadn't been since I was 13. He handed it to me, saying no one else deserved it. I was taken aback. It was the first time he'd given anything like that to anyone in our family. He said he always knew I'd be the one to grow up. On the drive home, James finally broke the silence. I saw his name on my screen and answered the call. He was desperate. He knew I had reported him. His voice was a mix of anger and pleading. He said he thought I'd be cool about it, like always. But this time was different. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect and boundaries that had been shattered. He tried to guilt trip me, saying he couldn't register for classes and was facing collections. But I was done being his safety net. I told him I couldn't help him anymore. He hung up, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any words he could have said. An hour later, my mom called. She started softly, trying to mend things between James and me. But soon her tone turned bitter. She accused me of letting this situation destroy everything. It was as if she couldn't see the real issue, the betrayal that ran deeper than any family feud. I've been sitting here for a while thinking about how to start this. It's not easy to lay everything out there, especially when it involves family and such deep-rooted stuff. But I guess there's no point in sugarcoating it. It all started with a trip to Switzerland. You see, one day I found out that a flight was booked with my card, and it wasn't for me. It was for James and a few others, and the caption read, "Just the close ones." That hit me hard. I realized I wasn't considered one of the close ones anymore, and it felt like a punch in the gut. Then, out of nowhere, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a year messaged me. They said I was becoming a disappointment, that I used to be generous, and now I was changing. Maybe I was changing, but I didn't see it as a bad thing. The next day, I went to my parents' house. I didn't announce my arrival, I just walked in through the side garage door, grabbed the key to the Civic, and drove it home. The car was in my name, after all. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. It was as if everyone had suddenly come to the same realization. I was done being the safety net they took for granted. By the end of the month, James was officially out of school. No classes, no re-registration, nothing. I checked the university's public directory myself to confirm it. His name had vanished. It was like he hoped someone would swoop in and save him at the last minute. Maybe he thought my parents or another cousin would step in. But no one did this time. I braced myself for the fallout, expecting drama, angry messages, maybe even some yelling. But instead, there was an unsettling quiet. And then, slowly, the unexpected began to happen. People started switching sides. Not everyone, of course. My mom was still furious. Her texts were cold and clipped, full of disappointment and accusations that I should have handled things differently, like it was some office dispute. But her words didn't carry the same weight anymore. They had less power, and I could feel that shift. Then, to my surprise, some of my cousins, aunts, and even family friends started reaching out. At first, it was just questions. What really happened? Why had things turned out this way? Then they began sharing things with me, things I never knew. One cousin told me my mom was already asking her husband to co-sign a small loan for James. Another mentioned my parents were considering refinancing their house, blaming me for putting them in that position. And the most surprising revelation came from one of James's own friends. They sent me a message on Instagram saying they understood why I cut him off. They said James had told them his version of events, but they'd figured out the truth on their own. It was surreal hearing that, knowing I wasn't the villain in everyone's story. And then came the call from my grandfather's lawyer. The transfer of the lake cabin was finalized, but there was more. My grandfather had updated his will, removing my parents and James as beneficiaries. He no longer trusted them, and I was named the sole inheritor on his side. I never wanted to be at the center of some estate drama, but my grandfather had quietly observed everything, and he'd drawn his own conclusions. That weekend, I decided to visit the cabin. It was quiet, isolated, and a bit rough around the edges. But it felt untouched, like a place free from the chaos and deceit that had become so familiar. I sat on the porch for over an hour, looking out at the lake. I hadn't felt such calm in years. When I returned home, my dad was waiting outside my apartment. No text, no warning, just standing there. He said he wanted to talk, not to fix anything, just to be honest. I let him speak. He admitted they'd crossed a line, relied on me too much, and allowed James to believe he was entitled to everything without accountability. He said he didn't agree with how I handled it at first, but now he understood. "You were right to draw the line," he said. Then he reached out his hand. I didn't expect that, but I shook it. There wasn't much left to say. Later that night, I got a message from James. He blamed me for destroying everything, said all I had to do was help like before. I read it twice and then archived the thread. I moved on. By then, everyone finally understood something I had known for a long time. I wasn't the problem. I was just the only one willing to stop being part of it. As spring rolled in, I hadn't heard from James in almost a month. The silence was no longer deafening. It was expected. I didn't know where he was living, how he was surviving, or if he had found a job. A part of me was curious, but I knew better than to let curiosity lead me back into that mess. Then one afternoon, a message arrived. It was short, hesitant. It was from James asking if we could talk. My first thought was, why now? But I agreed. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop. It was time to face whatever this was, head on. I remember that afternoon vividly, like a scene from a movie I can't forget. I went to see him at the coffee shop, the one near the community college he used to make jokes about. He looked different, thinner, a bit older, like life had taken its toll on him under the harsh fluorescent lights and the restless nights. It was strange seeing him like that, as if he had been forced to grow up all of a sudden, and it was both unsettling and a little satisfying. He didn't bother to dress up for the apology, and somehow that made it feel more genuine. I knew what was coming, the words I'd heard 1,000 times in my head. He admitted he had gone too far, that he hadn't realized the weight of what I was carrying until it all came crashing down on him. He confessed he had made excuses for years because it was easier than making changes. But then, he said something that caught me off guard. He admitted it wasn't just about messing up the money. He had ruined how I saw everyone around me, and he regretted that the most. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. I didn't hate him, I said, but I couldn't trust him either. He nodded, acknowledging that he didn't expect me to. And then he did something I never saw coming. He offered to pay me back. It was so absurd I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it seemed impossible. Yet he didn't flinch. He said he would do it little by little, even if it took years. I didn't give him an answer. I simply stood up, nodded, and walked away. I didn't tell him to keep in touch or offer to help him get started. I didn't hug him or forgive him or make a scene. I just left it as it was. Some debts go beyond money, and sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing things. It comes from leaving them broken and choosing to move forward anyway. That weekend, I drove to the cabin again. The air was still cold, and the lake was half frozen, but I opened all the windows anyway, letting everything air out. I made a fire, drank coffee on the porch, and didn't look at my phone once. It was the first time I realized I wasn't protecting my peace anymore. I was simply living in it. A few days later, a cousin who once called me cold texted again. He asked how I was and said he admired how I handled everything. It made him rethink how much he'd let people use him too. People were noticing, they were watching. Turns out, standing up for yourself inspires courage in others, even those who stayed silent when you were being torn apart. A couple of weeks later, I visited my grandfather. We didn't talk about James or my parents or anything dramatic. We just sat on his porch, watching birds fight over crusts of bread like it was a matter of life and death. Then he turned to me and said he thought I'd grow bitter from all this. I admitted I thought so too, but I didn't. I just got stronger. That was it. No long speeches or final lessons because I already had what I needed. The money didn't matter anymore. The tuition, the trip, the fake signatures, the betrayal. It all faded into the background. The most important thing I gained wasn't the lake cabin. It was the realization that I never needed any of them to be whole. And the moment I stopped letting them chip away at me, I became someone they could never break again. It's been a year since I went to Switzerland. Since that text that lit the fuse, since I pulled back every dollar, shut off every faucet, and let the bridge burn itself down. James never paid me back. Not a cent, but he never asked for anything more either. He's working full-time now, doing warehouse shifts, something with night hours. It's not glamorous, not what he planned, but it's honest and quiet. My parents still haven't apologized. Not really. They circle around it, ask how I'm doing, send a birthday card unsigned, as if small gestures might mend something deeply broken. I don't chase it and I don't ignore it, I just let it be. The family talks about me differently now, less like I'm cold, more like I did what they wish they'd had the courage to do. Boundaries, it turns out, are contagious. Since then, Two cousins stopped lending money to their parents, and another left a toxic family group chat altogether. And me, I've stopped explaining myself. I used to narrate every decision, soften every stance, pad every truth with disclaimers just to keep the peace. Now I don't. Now I just say no or nothing and let the silence do what it needs to do. Sometimes peace isn't soft. Sometimes it's heavy like a locked door, like walking away. But it's still peace. There's something strange about losing so much and feeling more whole afterward. I don't miss the calls that came with strings. I don't miss being someone's backup plan. I don't miss being needed so much that I disappeared in the process. The lake cabin became a kind of ritual. Every month, I drive up there. I open the windows, light the fire, and walk the shoreline. I don't bring guests. No one else from the family knows I still go. It's mine now in every sense of the word. And the quiet, it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like freedom. I often find myself reflecting on the past, not with resentment, but with a sense of understanding. It took me a long time to realize that I was being used, treated like an endless resource, a backup plan, a bank account with a face. I look back now and I see it all clearly. They were never going to stop taking, not until I refused to give anymore. And I did stop, maybe a little too late, but maybe just in time. It was one of those moments that changed everything for me. The other day, I bumped into one of my aunts at the grocery store. This was the same aunt who once told me I should be ashamed for what I did to James. She didn't have much to say this time, just a quick nod and a quiet, awkward, "Hey." I nodded back and kept moving. It's funny how you can tell when someone's perspective has shifted behind your back, when they've moved from thinking you went too far to maybe realizing you had a point. But that's okay. I don't need recognition or validation from them. What I need is peace. And I find that peace every time I get into my car, knowing no one else has a copy of the keys. Every time I check my accounts and see only my name, not someone else's debts. Each time I say no and feel no need to explain myself. That's when I know I'm not bitter. I'm free. I sometimes wonder if they sit around and talk about it, about what happened, about how everything fell apart. Do they replay their choices, or is it easier for them to just blame me? Maybe they claim I've changed, gotten cold, selfish, or too proud. But I didn't change. They simply reached the limit of what I was willing to tolerate. And when I didn't bend or cave in, they labeled it as betrayal. But I see it as setting a boundary. The truth is, they were never afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing access to me. And once that access was cut off, they had to actually see me, not as the helpful daughter or the generous sister or the reliable safety net, but just me. And they didn't like what they saw because it meant they had to take responsibility. James used to text me weekly with updates about school, grades, clubs, and his big plans, all carefully crafted to keep the support flowing. After everything, there hasn't been a single update, not a word about whether he returned to school, paid off his balance, or ever took responsibility for his actions. It's not my job to ask. That's what they never understood. Helping isn't a personality trait, it's a choice, and I have the right to stop choosing it. My mom still sends holiday messages, the kind that sound warm but say nothing substantial. No apology, no real conversation, just soft edges around hard silence. She'll mention some cousin who just had a baby or an aunt moving to Arizona, then slip in a, "We'd love to see you sometime." I don't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I've healed. And healed people don't step back into the fire just to prove they're fireproof. I used to think forgiveness meant opening the door again. Now I understand that sometimes forgiveness is quietly locking it and walking away. Some people don't deserve the new version of you. They only knew the version they could drain. They don't get to meet the one who finally filled herself back up. Last week, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten with no return address. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. It was from James. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs. He mentioned working full-time, still in the warehouse, still trying to get back into school. He said he knew he had a long way to go. He didn't ask for money or help, just hoped I was doing well and that he meant what he said about paying me back. I read it twice, then folded it up and tucked it into the back of my filing cabinet. Not because I needed to keep it, but because I wasn't ready to throw it away just yet. Some wounds scar, some stay open, and some just fade like bruises you almost forget until someone brushes up against them. I still think about the trip, the photo, the caption, just the close ones. I used to hear those words as a taunt. Now they sound different to me. They meant it, but they didn't realize who the close ones actually were until I stepped away. I used to feel guilty for walking away, used to wonder if I was the villain in their story. But then I reminded myself that I never had control over their narrative. I only have control over mine. And in my story, I stopped letting love be a transaction, stopped letting family be an excuse for mistreatment, stopped handing out pieces of myself just to keep others comfortable. The lake cabin still stands. The water is clearer now, the silence deeper, the air lighter. Sometimes I bring a book. Sometimes I just sit with my coffee and let the wind tangle my hair. No noise, no guilt, no pretending. Just me, Selena, not the wallet, not the fixer, not the one they leaned on until she collapsed. Just a woman who learned the cost of peace and finally decided she was worth it.